The Gouf is very much a victim of its own success. Anyone familiar with the original Mobile Suit Gundam anime knows what it looks like, the name of the first ace to pilot it, and what weapons it has. Officially, it has the finger Vulcans for its primary weapon, but it is more well known for its heat rod as a secondary weapon. To complete its basic arsenal, it also has a heat sword for a melee weapon. Although the animation is dated by today's standards, the Gouf was presented to be a menacing foe. When it first appeared, the atmosphere darkened and there was even lightning in the background. We even see Amuro shake in fear inside the Gundam when he first encounters it on Earth. Rambaral, the pilot of the Gouf, then utters the famous line,
"This is no Zaku, boy, no Zaku!"
Now, obviously when the creators created the Gouf, they didn't have video games in mind. But it is here when the problems first begin, all the way back 4 decades ago. Because we know what weapons it had in the anime, it can't exactly change. We can't give it an additional weapon because that would break the lore of the Gouf. Interestingly enough, however, it has received several buffs and updates. But every time it gets improved, it's given a different name. Give it a minigun, now it's called the Gouf Custom. Give it a normal hand so it can use machine guns and bazookas, now it's the Gouf BD. Give it the ability to fly, and you get the point. The Gouf has been improved several times over the years, but those improvements always lead to different variants. In this way, it is similar to the Soviet T-34 tank from World War II. When it was improved in the later stages of the war, it was no longer considered the same tank anymore, and was reclassified as the T-34-85. Because of this, even though improvements have been constantly made, the original Gouf is constantly being left behind, resulting in the line, "This is no Zaku, boy," almost meaningless. At least not in the way it was intended to mean. If the line meant to say that it was superior to a Zaku, then, at least in Gundam Battle Operation 2, that is false. Many Zaku 2s and even Zaku 1s can easily hold their own against the original Gouf. Now, that is not to say that it is as useless as the Mongolian Navy. And at 250 and 300, it can still pack a mean punch in the right hands, especially on smaller maps. But it requires a certain type of player who just wants to watch the world burn to use it. The reason is because there are other suits at its cost range that do what it does better. So to a new player, and even some veteran players, there's almost no point in using the Gouf outside of nostalgia purposes. Take for example the Gouf's heat rod. Is it effective? Of course. And it can be very difficult to defend against. Although at any point when using it, you are wide open for an attack, especially for the heavy attack. The side swipe and neutral strike can be just as effective for stunning purposes. It does, however, require some skill to use properly. More skill, I will dare say, than using the Gundam's Hyper Hammer. And at 250, there is already the football head, Hey Arnold looking abomination that is the Agugai, a monstrous and hideous looking thing that can use a more effective heat rod that counts as a melee weapon instead of a secondary weapon. This means that unlike the Gouf's heat rod, which is only able to strike once before having a cooldown for 6 long seconds, the Agugai's multi-heat rod can strike twice before having a cooldown. And even then, the cooldown for the Agugai only takes 2.5 seconds. This essentially gives you 4 melee hits in the same amount of time it takes the Gouf to deliver 1 hit. In addition, the Agugai also has a secondary heat rod weapon option, so make that 5 heat rod strikes in 6 seconds. Normally, I would let this slide. I would move on to play some other suit. If I ever want to use a Gouf, I would simply use the Gouf Custom, or some other variant, while forgetting that the original Gouf exists somewhere in the hangar. I don't even like the Agugai anyways, so it makes no difference to me if one is better than the other. But then that same old quote echoed in my head from time to time. "This is no Zaku, boy, no Zaku." It is better than a Zaku, except it's not, but it's supposed to be. I had to stop and go for a drive to think this over. I had to decide if I was okay with this. I kept telling myself everything was fine. This is just the way the world works. I'm not supposed to understand everything. We're all just tiny specks of dust, infinitely smaller than those blue dots we see in the night sky. There are things we will never know, mysteries that will never be solved. I found a bar along the highway to stop at. I sat down for a drink hoping it would all go away. It's intended for ace pilots after all. The Gouf is likely just a suit that requires a certain level of skill to know how to use properly. I wanted to believe this. For a little while I almost did, but never completely, because the Gouf Custom was never difficult to use, nor any of the other variants. So why this one? Just why? And why does it look so bad in some of the scenes in the original anime? I then realized that I haven't really drank since college and decided to leave before I discovered how much of a lightweight I may have become now. I went back to the hangar and decided to look at the numbers one more time. Maybe I could make some sense out of all this. I even took it out on a few more missions to figure this out. As I've said before, it's fine in 250. At 300 it can still be good. At 350, however, this thing's performance can be as ugly as some of the old Gundam's dated animation is in some instances. Not to mention, at 350 you already have the Gouf Custom, which has even received a buff fairly recently as well. Finally, I arrived at a conclusion. The key was the heat rod, of course. The finger Vulcans are already pretty good, and can build up to stunning an enemy pretty easily, although adding 10 more rounds wouldn't hurt. Anyways, there are 3 ways of improving the heat rod. One is to give a secondary mode players can switch to that will have a faster cooldown rate but will deal less damage at the same time. The second option is to give the Gouf a second melee weapon that will be another attack with the heat rod, similar to the Agugai's multi-heat rod. Or 3, simply lower the cooldown rate of the heat rod. I want to say lower it down to 4 seconds, just like the Gundam's Hyper Hammer, but at 250 that might be too much. So make it 4.5 or 5 seconds. Now, unlike in my previous videos where I either praise a mobile suit for being as it is, like the G3 Gundam, or comment on how it could be buffed, in this one I have to add a concern that I have. Maybe the Gouf is fine the way that it is. Any of my suggestions could quite possibly make the Gouf overpowered for 250. The only way I can justify any of my suggestions in reality is if it were to be removed from 250 and strictly made the level 1 to start at 300. What do you all think? Is it fine the way that it is? My only thing is that since it's a Gouf, I should want to pick it for sorties more than I want to use a Zaku, but I don't. Anyways, this has been Mobile Suit K9 signing off.